Welcome to Inside the Care Home. This is a podcast for care home owners and senior leaders who are trying to run outstanding care services in a world that's getting more complex, more digital, and more demanding by the year. Each episode is an honest look at the decisions, trade-offs, and mistakes that sit behind the day-to-day reality of operating a care home, where data and digital systems shape outcomes, but it's leadership that determines whether they help or hinder. This isn't about tools or trends. It's about thinking clearly, leading well, and building care homes that are sustainable for the people who live in them and the people who run them. So let's get into it.
Hello again, I'm Richard Ayres, a social care advisor at Care England. Now, a recurring theme from what we hear from social care leaders is that the system places increasing demand on their time, attention and capacity, often leaving little space to step back and lead strategically. So this series we're doing with DigiHive is intended to create space for reflection on what leadership in adult social care actually feels like, rather than what it looks like on paper. So across these 4 conversations, we're exploring the realities of financial pressure and quality expectations, which we recorded in our first series. And today we're looking at time constraints, and next we'll be looking at workforce challenges. So I'm joined again by Samir Patel. Samir, for anyone joining us partway through this series, do you want to briefly introduce yourself again?
Thank you so much, Richard, and a great pleasure to be here again with you. And we are hopefully going to have a really interesting conversation around the importance of time and how technology can hopefully give us a bit of that all-important time back. So thank you very much for the opportunity again.
Wonderful. Well, Samir, I want to start today with something almost every care leader is going to recognise, that's time poverty. Not because leaders are insufficient or disorganised, we're not saying that at all, but it's because care homes never stop. It's a continual 24/7, 365 organisation. There are rotas to fix, calls to return, paperwork to complete, staff to support, families to reassure, and regulators to respond to. So urgency kind of fills every gap in the day. And when everything feels urgent, leadership time can sometimes disappear and become almost secondary. So from what you see, how is this pressure on time actually affecting how care leaders actually lead?
I think this is a truly fascinating subject to explore a bit further. And straight off the bat, I think what I want to do is really just acknowledge that care is truly just relentless. And I don't think that's anybody's fault in particular. I think it's just the way that the system is and the way that the structures are currently. And I think we shouldn't take that as a huge negative slight against us as leaders in the sector. I think we're busy, but we're busy for really, really good reasons. It's because we want to ultimately produce the best outcomes that we can for our residents and for the people we have the privilege of looking after. So whatever we can do to try and get some of that time back, to allow us to develop, to allow us to reflect, for me is vitally, vitally important. But what I think I also want to just quickly say is that busyness doesn't equal progress. And we're at a stage in the care sector right now where I think there is an awful lot of opportunity for us to be able to progress and to make some really impactful changes to our services for the better. And we can only do that if we do have this magical time. We aren't time poor, but we do have a bit of slack in our daily lives, in our daily work lives, to be able to progress our services and to really develop what we are offering in our care homes. And at the moment, a lot of leaders that I speak to, if I'm honest, a lot of the feedback and the conversations we have is that this leadership part of our role kind of gets squeezed in between other bits, between meetings, between operational challenges. And if we want to progress, being busy cannot be part of the equation. And I think sometimes also when we reflect back, sometimes we think we are making progress if we are busy. But there's a famous saying, isn't there, that sometimes we can be busy fools. And I think it's important we take that on board and really do our best to make sure that we are allowing as a self this time and this space and this capacity to be able to use time more effectively so we can make progress.
And you're absolutely right. I do like the busy fool analogy, but we are, as you said before, we are doing purposeful work. We're purposeful businesses, and we're always striving for the best possible outcomes. But you were also right. There is always opportunities in every situation. There's always we need to be half glass full leaders, because there are always opportunities. And I know you said before that that this isn't the issue isn't effort, it's where the time gets spent. So what tends to crowd leadership time out in the world of care?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that no one can deny the hard-working nature of the people that work in our sector, the leaders, right the way through the entire teams, the care teams, the registered managers, care team managers, housekeeping teams, maintenance teams. And I suppose it's not just the leadership time, but we want to, as leaders, be able to also create time for them so that they can, again, look how they can evolve and develop their particular departments or within their roles. But I think the challenge, as you rightly say, is that this sense of constant urgency is just always there. There's always a gap in the rota, or there's a question from a member of staff, or a holiday request, or an issue that's suddenly come up with the last minute for that trip you've planned for the residents to go down to the local pub or coffee house, or for a coffee into town. There's always these little issues that we get drawn into, especially, as I say, the registered managers. And quite often when you have these interruptions, all these little 5-minute, can I have a quick 5-minute chat? They all stack up, don't they? And they all mount up, and that kind of eats into our day. And unfortunately, that can then mean that as leaders, that we end up reacting during our days, and we're not really in control of our day, and we're not really able to craft our days as we want them. So things that often get pushed back, I think, when there is this sense of urgency in a care service and in a care home, is, as I say, that time to think, which I think is really important and really undervalued. That time to plan, in order to think ahead, to forecast ahead, to actually have that space to think clearly about, actually, if I make this change, what are the consequences and the potential positive impacts, but also some of those risks that might be, I might not have had time to think about fully. But for another huge one for me, though, and things that get pushed back, is this piece on staff development. And obviously one of the pillars we spoke about, or we will be speaking about, is people. And for me, retention and staff development is huge. So again, as leaders, if we can have a bit of time to think about how we can develop our team, that is vitally, vitally important. And of course, it wouldn't be a DigiHive event, Richard, if we weren't talking about systems and technology. Having time to properly think about the rollout of a potential new piece of technology or software, and how that, again, can drive improvement within our service, for me, is really, really important. So sometimes I think firefighting and being busy can feel like it's being productive, but it allows this mission drift, is the phrase we use in our services. Is it actually having a meaningful, impactful, positive framing to what we're trying to get to in our service?
Yeah, that sense of constant urgency. I don't know where time goes, on a day-to-day basis anymore. It just seems to sort of disappear and into the ether. And I like that. Need the time to think clearly, plan and forecast. Less reactive, more proactive. But you are absolutely spot on about the staffing side of things, because they are our most valuable asset, and with your most valuable asset, you need to protect them and nurture them and look after them. Because without them, we have nothing. And technology is great in a way to create efficiencies, but you need to make sure that it doesn't create a burden. So it's if leaders want to kind of move out of constant reaction, what needs to change in how they think about time?
I think this is a really challenging part, actually, because it requires this mindset shift. We become creatures of habit, don't we? We get set in our routines and our ways of working. But as a leader, I think it's really important that if we want to optimize, I think is the right word, our time, then it does require a bit of a mind shift change. And I think the first stage for me will be to stop thinking about time as something that we need to manage. There are only 365 days in the year, 24 hours in a day. And we have to be able to think about time, for me, as something that we need to protect. And I think that by protecting our time, that allows us to have the space to be able to review and make meaningful, good decisions, hopefully. And I think that requires quite a huge shift of change. When we're in this constant, fight or flight mode of reacting and having to make lots of decisions. And there was an interesting phrase I heard last week called decision fatigue. I think leaders in care can definitely suffer from that. But actually, if we are carving out time in our calendars and in our diaries, and we're protecting that time to allow us this space, I think that's really, really valuable. And I think also, as a leader, how we use our time ourselves as leaders, that trickles down and filters down to the rest of our teams, to our regional managers, down to our care home managers and registered managers, to our deputy managers, and right the way throughout the team. And how we, as I say, can prioritize our time, can have a really good, meaningful impact on those further members down of the team. And I think also, if we are having that bit more space and a bit more time, it means that things don't feel quite as rushed either. And I think that always comes with a calmness, especially in a care home setting. If things are manic and people running around and it seems busy, for me, I don't think that has the best outlook for the residents in the service and in the home. So again, if we can be a bit more calm, be a bit more controlled, have that space, protect some of that time within our daily structures, I think, again, we can link it back to the positive impact that has on our residents. So I think if we as leaders never pause, then the organisation never will pause either. And that's not necessarily a good thing.
Wow. I mean, time is an incredibly precious resource. I mean, we get every minute only once, don't we? So we do need to kind of protect that. It's a very interesting kind of concept, a way to kind of look at it. And if we think of time in the way that we and protect it and preserve it, like we do those that we provide care and support to, we kind of need to try and create that time contagion through the workforce. It's a great philosophy, and it does sound incredibly sensible, but it also sounds very difficult in practice. So just to try and bring that to life for us, what's kind of maybe just one of the simple rules that helps you protect your leadership time that you could share with people today?
I think one of the things I've learned over my time in the sector is that if it matters, then we need to protect time to be able to make sure we can have a conversation or an impact, or time to think about it. And quite often for me, the important work that needs to get done doesn't shout. It always gets shoved further down the to-do list, doesn't it, rather than being prioritized. So urgent work will always come to the top, because there will always be urgent stuff that needs to be done. But actually, the important work, sometimes we kick that can down the road, which for me is not a good thing. And actually, if we maybe reframe that, and I don't think what I'm trying to suggest here is that we have perfect diaries, everything aligned to the minute, fully planned down to the minutiae detail. But I think intention for me is a really, really important word. And as I say, if we have the intent to make sure that we are having this time to think about decisions that we have to make as leaders, if we are intentionally creating the time so that we can focus on staff development, if we are ensuring there is a gap in my calendar once every month to review all of the feedback we've had in the service, alongside my manager and the people in the departments that we're looking at that particular month. If we're making sure that, again, all the team members that need to be involved are so, when we're talking about audits and review of audits that have taken place on a monthly basis, and that all important strategy, making sure that we've got time to think about where we want to focus our time to drive that improvement and strategy within our care homes. So for me, I don't think, if we don't have this intention around time, that's not a good thing. And if important work is not protected, it will definitely be taken over by something else that will come to the top of that list.
That's something to think about. Urgent first, and that I think I have to look at my own sort of work as well. Think what am I doing that's important, that's getting lost, and I need to think about the intent of decisions, and intentionally creating that time and blocking that time out to really focus on those important elements, the reviews, the strategic side of things. It's a really interesting concept, because sometimes I'm too busy personally to kind of think about, I've got to put time aside to do it. So note to self there. One thing that comes up quite a bit is around delegation within these conversations, because leaders seem to really struggle with it. Why do you think that is, that leaders struggle so much with delegation?
This one, I have to say, really resonates with me, because this has been really hard for me to learn over the years and try to get better at. And I think it's still a journey that I'm on, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, because quite often our mindset is that I'll just do it. It's quicker if I do it. I'll just get it done and we can move on. And that's probably true in the short term. And in that immediacy of that moment, this probably is the quicker and easier thing to do. But actually, I think I've come to learn that actually it's quite damaging in the long term. And the consequences of that and of me saying it's just quicker if I do it is that I, as a leader in my services or in our businesses, I then become the bottleneck. And that's the last thing that I want. I don't want decisions to be sat waiting for me. And that stops the rest of the team from progressing or moving something forward to the next stage that they need to. So, not making myself a bottleneck in any of our businesses is really, really important. And as I say, it also means that we're not empowering our team, right? And that they aren't developing and they aren't taking ownership and feeling empowered. So I really want that to be a huge pillar of what our teams are. And I think that managing our time better and making sure that we as leaders aren't bottlenecks is a good way to go in terms of developing that. However, I think the thing that I've challenged with over time is that sometimes I've felt over the years that if I'm delegating, then it can lead to an erosion or a loss of the standards that we want to make sure we're maintaining. And I think I've had to reframe that. We talked about mindset earlier on, and that actually delegation, it's not a loss of standards, but actually it's creating capacity. And I think that's quite an interesting way for us to think about it, that actually by delegating, I'm creating more capacity within our little ecosystem, within our little operational structure, that will hopefully mean things can move forward and get done and resolved a lot quicker. And that's a good thing. So I think within our services now, we make sure that every task as a leader is something that we hold on to. And actually we're teaching other members of the team those skills as well, so that they can understand and make the run, make sure the business is running. And that's been a huge change, making sure that I'm not in the business and I'm not working in the business, but I'm working on the business. And delegation for me now, hopefully, isn't a trust issue. It's actually linked to time, and it's a time decision.
Well, working on the business rather than in the business, that's a really interesting concept, and it's kind of leadership looking down. That makes a lot of sense. And you're absolutely right. It's very damaging longer term not to delegate, because you're not developing those and people aren't coming through them. We've all seen the bottlenecks. We know who those people are. I myself have been very, very guilty of that in the past. If someone is listening to this thinking, that's exactly me, that's what I do, what's the kind of just the one sort of single practical thing they could do this week to kind of make a difference, to kind of see the benefits of doing that themselves?
It's always about the small wins for me. So taking that first step is really, really important. Don't think you're going to build Rome in a day. It is a journey and it will take a bit of time, but taking that first small step is so, so important. So a great question. I think I would start with my diary and look at my calendar. Just look at that and find 1 hour in the week that you can look to protect and get that blocked out in your diary. And it's a non-negotiable. So no matter what happens, you're not going to cave and you're not going to give in or allow somebody else to take that precious 1 hour for you just in a week. And you're not going to solve everything in that 1 hour. But again, as I said, you'll be able to find maybe one thing that you can work on in a clear, methodical, uncluttered way. And once we start building these little marginal gains, these little shifts, these small shifts, they'll build up over time and it will be like a snowball. So I think start small, and small changes in how time is used will over time create bigger shifts. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Brilliant.
And I go back to that old sort of adage of how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And it's only 1 hour in a working week, and a non-negotiable 1 hour. That seems very sensible. And from those small acorns, great oaks grow, don't they? So that's great advice, Samir. Thank you. And I'm going to have to take that on board myself, and I'm going to start blocking that time out in my diary. Care homes will always be busy. We know leadership doesn't happen in the gaps between emergencies. It kind of happens when time is used deliberately. That's why through the partnership with Care England and DigiHive, we're focusing on helping leaders to really step out of that constant firefighting and build a more sustainable way of working. And I know inside the DigiHive Academy, members can access practical frameworks around kind of time, delegation, decision making, alongside my mentoring style discussions with other leaders facing the same time pressures, because we can learn from each other. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? Sharing that learning. So if time pressure is stopping any of you listening or watching this from leading the way that you want to, then this is exactly what that support is designed to help you with. So look, huge thank you to you, Samir, again, for giving us those pearls of wisdom and those nuggets that you do each time. Thank you to everyone for listening, and we hope that you will join us for the last session on people very soon. Thank you very much.
Running a care home rarely gives you time to step back and think. Most days you're just moving from one decision and on to the next. But this podcast exists to pause that momentum for a moment, to look at what's actually happening inside care homes, the pressures, the trade-offs, the things that don't always make it into the reports or the meetings. So if something in this episode felt familiar, I hope that's intentional. These conversations aren't about having perfect answers. They're about seeing the reality more clearly, so the next decision is better than the one before. I'll continue this inside look next time. This is Inside the Care Home, an honest look at the decisions and realities behind running care homes today. Thanks for listening.